Hi, and welcome to Chapter 12, where we're going to be talking about leadership. So, after studying this chapter, you should be able to contrast leadership and management. What is the difference between the two? Summarize the conclusions of trait theories of leadership, identify the central tenets of main limitations of behavioral theories, assess contingency theories of leadership by their level of support, compare charismatic and transformational leaders, describe the role of ethics and trust in authentic leadership, demonstrate the role of mentoring plays in the understanding of leadership, and address challenges to the effectiveness of leadership, and finally describe how organizations can find or create effective leaders. So the topic of leadership is a pretty interesting one. I think everybody appreciates it when they have a good leader. I think everybody strives, if they're put in a position, to be an inspirational or effective leader if the situation arises. So it's something that all of us have had the opportunity to follow a leader, and some of us have had the opportunity to be a leader. So the question is, what makes a good leader and an effective leader? Now, this is something that forms the basis of a lot of discussion. So researchers have looked at this question from a behavioral point of view, from a managerial operations point of view, from many different sources and sides. And they have tried to define the characteristics of leadership. And one of the most basic questions is, are leaders born or are they made? Or is it a combination of both? So those are just some of the topics we're going to be discussing today, and I'll add some of my own personal life experience because I've been a leader and I've worked for many different types of leaders. Sadly to say, most of them terrible, but there's been a few good ones. So when we talk about leadership, leadership is the ability to influence a group towards the achievement of goals, would be how the textbook would define it. So a leader does not have to be someone who holds a formal title or position. In fact, it's very impressive when someone's a leader who doesn't hold a title or position. To me, those are the most impressive leaders. People you want to follow, not because they're your boss. So leaders can emerge from a group and provide vision and motivation to those around them. They are critical in helping people cope with change by establishing direction that relates to a vision. And in order to achieve the vision, they align resources and inspire workers towards organizational goals. Management deals with the complexity of the organization and works with planning, organizing, leading, and controlling to bring about order and consistency in the organization. So if we kind of think about leadership is the key to organizations being successful. So an organization with strong leadership and strong management is going to be much more successful. Now, not all leaders are managers, and not all managers are leaders. There are two separate things. So a manager is someone who's directly responsible for the day-to-day business of their subordinates or employees. There can be a leader who doesn't have subordinates. He's just a leader of a movement or a spiritual leader, a leader in some way that's not actually a business manager. So those are two different things. So don't think that, although managers are often considered leaders, not every leader is considered a manager, is how I look at it. Okay. So even though the two roles have different areas of focus, they're necessary for organizations to succeed as far as management and leadership. All right, next slide. Okay, so trait theories of leadership. So let's talk about this. The trait theory of leadership looks at personality, social, physical, and intellectual traits that differentiate leaders from non-leaders. Initially, the theory was based on studies that looked over 80 different traits, which allowed most anything to be defined as leadership. A breakthrough occurred when researchers began to organize the traits into categories. And this became known as the Big Five personality framework, where 5 groups of traits were found to be consistently present among leaders. Some essential leadership traits included extravision, conscientiousness, openness, agreeableness, emotional intelligence, we talked about in the previous chapter. And although a link between emotional intelligence and leadership has not been fully explored, one is commonly considered a requirement for the other. So when we look at the Big Five personality framework, there are some personality traits that we see consistently in leaders. So I think we can all agree that we would like someone to lead us who is conscientious about our needs and is open, has an open mind, who is agreeable and emotionally stable and almost a support to us, and who has the emotional intelligence to understand, to be a mature person, and not let ego or personal feelings and attitudes affect his ability to lead. And I think that's really critical here. So 2 conclusions. The fact that individuals exhibit the right traits and that others consider him a leader does not necessarily mean that he'll be an effective leader. So successful at getting the group to achieve goals is what makes a leader effective. Now, so traits can predict leadership, but do traits do a good job of predicting how effective a leader is going to be? So someone can portray leadership qualities, but that doesn't necessarily make him an effective leader. Okay. So let's go to the behavioral theories. So behavioral theories of leadership focus on the premise that behaviors can be taught and traits cannot. So leaders are trained, not born. So this would say that leaders are trained and not born. Well, I just said that twice. We can determine leadership effectiveness. So certain behaviors that make somebody a good leader, they can be trained. And the 2 key studies from Ohio State and the University of Michigan kind of looked at this. Now, studies are fine, but I think we all kind of have our own opinions about this. As far as I'm in the camp that leadership is something that's intuitive to a person. So certain people are intuitive leaders. They have the necessary mix of desire and emotion to want to help and lead and achieve at a higher level. And I do believe that certain people, no matter how much training you give them, can be effective leaders. I do believe that people who possess the correct balance of traits have the potential to be a good leader, and that training can help them improve and become an effective and useful leader. And so I do believe that there are people out there that really will never be a very effective leader. The amount of training would be insurmountable for them to actually get to a position where they have the skills and the traits and the personality to be an effective leader. So that's how I feel. I think many of you might agree. And some of you out there might be thinking to yourself, like, yeah, I'm an effective leader. I can see myself being a leader. And, and you can see that if you had some more training and some methods and some scope, that you could be a very effective leader. And there's some people out there that say, you know what? I don't have any interest in leading other people. I don't think I'm a particularly effective leader, and nor do I really want to stand out and really put myself out there to be a leader, and that's fine. Not everybody has to be a leader. In fact, we don't need that many leaders. We need more followers than leaders, but the leaders we do have, we need them to be effective. All right, so let's look at some of these studies that they quote unquote, or this book talks about. And again, a study doesn't make a fact. It just kind of highlights some ideas and some perceptions. Okay, so 2 key studies in the area of behavioral leadership advanced our understanding of this theory. The first study was done in Ohio State. Researchers looked at important dimensions of leadership behavior and began with over 1,000 dimensions. In the end, Ohio State studies were able to narrow it down to 2 dimensions, initiating structure and consideration. So initiating structure is what the leader is able to define and to structure their role and that of their employees to work towards the goals of the organization. And consideration is the ability for leaders to gain trust and respect of their followers to help them feel appreciated for what they do. Both behaviors have been proven to be very important in an effective leader. So that makes sense. So, if we look at the initiating structure, and that's really the motivation to want to organize, improve, set and achieve goals. So that definitely seems logical to me. And then we also have the consideration, which is concern for others' well-being, comfort, status, satisfaction. So if you're someone who doesn't care about people, probably not going to be a good leader. If you really just don't care about people and their behavior and their feelings and all the baggage that comes with them, if you're not a people person, don't be a leader. However, if you are a big people person, that's great. Love to be your friend. However, if you're not good at organizing, structuring, setting goals, organizing, budgeting, you're not going to be a good leader because you don't have the necessary organizational skills. Now, can someone be taught how to initiate structure? I believe people can be taught that, but they really have the desire to want to do that. It's sort of like the people who like to have a clean house and the people who don't mind having a messy house. So can you teach someone who's messy how to clean up? Sure you can. You can teach them all the tools and trade and techniques of cleaning up. But does that mean they're going to do it more than once a year? Probably not. So, and then you talk about consideration. Can you teach someone to be a more considerate person? Yeah, I guess you could. But if that person doesn't have that in them, they may not want to be a considerate person. So, again, initiating structure is when the leader is able to define the structure and their role of their employees towards the goals of the organization. And consideration is the ability for leaders to gain trust and respect. So that's really critical aspect, that if you have a leader that you trust and respect, you're going to be much more willing to follow him and do what he says and appreciate what they do for you. So you can see how this makes sense, how both of these are very important. Now let's go over to the University of Michigan. The University of Michigan study identifies 2 key dimensions of leadership behavior as well. They are similar to what we just talked about Ohio State's findings. However, the University of Michigan studies classify these behaviors as employee-oriented, which looks at the interpersonal relationships between leaders and their followers, and production-oriented, which focuses on the technical aspects of the job. Again, both are important for successful leadership, and both seem very similar to the Ohio study. So the production-oriented, this would be very similar to the initiating structure-oriented, which emphasize this, but this emphasizes more on the job, the technical tasks to be done, the aspects of the job. So basically how I look at this is, to be a leader, you have to know what the job is. You have to have done the job, be good at the job, and understand what it takes for people to be successful in the technical aspect that is the jobs of the people underneath you. That's why some of the most effective leaderships come up through the ranks and work at the lower level jobs before they take on the higher level jobs. Okay. Employee-oriented. This emphasizes interpersonal relationships and accepts individual differences. So employee-oriented this is a people person. So they are able to develop good and strong interpersonal relationships with their coworkers and subordinates. And if you have a good relationship, it's much more easier to work with a friend. Not that the leader is necessarily your friend, but it's much more easier to work with someone that you get along with than someone you don't. So if you get along with your boss and you feel that they're very personable to you, you'll do better. You'll be a better follower to that leader, maybe achieve more. Okay, so let's talk about some global implications. So global leadership results. In Brazil, leaders are participative and humane. That's what's valued in Brazil. In France, leaders are more of a bureaucrat, task-oriented and autocratic. So in France, they really appreciate a leader who follows the rules and is a productive and efficient bureaucrat. In China, initiating structure and consideration is important. Status differences is a critical aspect, but also participation is valued. Charisma and transformational leadership is important in all of these countries around the whole world. So the two most powerful, influential type of leaders are charismatic or transformational, or they call it charisma. Okay, so let's continue. Fiedler leadership model. Effective group performance depends on a proper match between the leader's style and the degree to which the situation gives the leader control. So let's talk a little bit about this. So in this theory, Fiedler is trying to match the leadership to the context. He proposes that leadership style is fixed. So the situation demands a charismatic, if the situation demands a charismatic leader, and your current leader does not exhibit that type of style or ability, you need to change leaders. So leadership style can be determined by taking the least preferred coworker questionnaire. After this is something Fiedler developed. So after the leadership style is determined, you can match the leader to the situation. And there are 3 dimensions to find a successful match. The first situational factor is the leader-member relationship. And this ties our behavioral studies by looking at the degree of trust and respect employees have for the leader. The second factor is the amount of structure that is embedded in the job assignment. And the last factor is the amount of influence the leader has over the decisions that represent power, such as hiring, firing, and rewards. In Fiedler's model, you need to find a leader to fit the situation or change the situation to fit the leader in order to achieve effective leadership for the organization. Now, in this theory, Fiedler is trying to match the leader to the context, like we've talked about. He proposes that, this leadership style is what he calls it fixed. I'm just saying the person leads in a particular way and they can't really change it. So you can determine, so this LPC helps determine the leadership style, and then you want to match the leader to the task, is what he was saying. So the situational control, what we discussed before, leader-mentor relations, task structure, and position power, is really the elements where you're going to match the leader to a particular situation. So matching, let me just go back for a second. Sorry about that. Okay. Matching leaders to situations. So let's look at what we have, the task-oriented and the relationship-oriented. So that would be sort of these 2 bars here, and then performance. So we have the categories 1 through 8, and which is leader-member relations, task structure, and position power. So if someone has category 1, they are good leader-mentor relations. They're high on task structure and they're strong on position power. The task-oriented is going to perform very well, where the relationship-oriented is going to perform more poorly. So the graph helps to visually determine the situational factors and what type of leader would be successful in the situation. So there are 8 possible situations in which leaders can find themselves in. By matching their LPC score to these 8 different situations, a leader can see where they will be most effective. For example, categories 4 through 6 would be better suited to a relationship-oriented leader because Fiedler's proposed that they would perform best in moderately favorable situations. So it's interesting, right? If you have more of a relationship and you have a situation where you have low power or poor leader-member relations or poor or even weak position power. Here you have weak position power with strong relations. Here you have strong position power but weak relations. So these are areas where having a more of a relationship with somebody would help. However, if you're either end of the spectrum, it seems like on 1, 2, and 7, 8, being more task-oriented type of leader would be better. So again, this is just people who study and research leadership, trying to put a scale or a model together, help define it better. It's kind of what academics do. All right, so other contingency theories, situational leadership theory, SLT, acknowledges the importance of followers and builds on the logic that leaders can compensate for their limited ability and motivation. Interesting, right? So successful leaders depend on selecting the right leadership style, contingent on followers' readiness to accomplish the task. So you could have unable and unwilling, unable but willing, able but unwilling, and able and willing, which is the best situation. So these are the situations that are going to be that the leader can sort of have to be knowledgeable of and work with. All right. So let's just talk a little bit more about this. So I think what makes it a good strong leader is knowing what the proper style would be to help in the situation where someone's unable and unwilling to work. What do you do as a leader? So certain leadership styles work better in that situation compared to when people are unable to do something but willing. So maybe that would be a leader, would be more of a trainer. Able but unwilling. So this leader would be someone who would be more of a motivator, would be more someone who would personally try to win these people over to make them more willing. Able and willing is the easiest people to lead. They really just probably need just a little bit of direction, but not too much motivation or supervision. And the worst situation would be unable and unwilling, where probably I describe that as like a temperamental child that doesn't want to do their homework there because it's too hard. So they're both unable and unwilling. So that takes the highest skilled manager to help convince them to do it and help train them to have the skills to have it done. Okay, so let's look at path goal theory. So effective leaders clarify followers' paths to their work goals and make their journey easier by reducing roadblocks. So directive or supportive leadership does not matter to followers' performance, and leaders need to be aware of their importance in facilitating. So the effectiveness of leaders depends on a large degree of their followers. So it's really the leader's job to provide followers with the environment to support the information, the resources to achieve their goals. So the leader has to set up a productive work environment. So if we look at the directive, leadership yields greater satisfaction when tasks are ambiguous or stressful. So if tasks are ambiguous or stressful, having someone that's more direct is going to get better results. Supportive leaders results in high performance and satisfaction when tasks are more structured. So if tasks are very structured, it's more up to the leaders, more like a cheerleader, being supportive and encouraging to go. And directive leader is perceived as redundant by employees with high ability or experience. So ever be in a situation where you know more than your boss and your boss wouldn't be able to do your job and you're very good at it and very experienced? It's sort of like, why is this guy bothering me? He doesn't know how to do my job. He doesn't know what it takes to help me do my job. Why is he getting the big dollars to manage me? Seems like I should be managing him. So you can see how that would be an unproductive leadership role. Okay, charismatic leadership. This is my favorite type of leader. Someone who really motivates you through their charisma just draws you in and you just can't help but want to follow them. So they have abilities that, followers observe these certain behaviors, and they have a charismatic leader has a strong vision, and they're able to express it and really communicate this vision, which is critical. They take risk, and people always admire people who take risk, whether they succeed or fail. They have a strong level of sensitivity and understanding and empathy for others, and they have often unconventional behaviors that make someone a very charismatic leader. I mean, it doesn't mean you can be very charismatic, but that doesn't necessarily make you a good leader. If you look at the political climate, I don't want to mention any political people running for president, because that just makes certain people happy and certain people mad. But you could see that some people in all these candidates have a certain charismatic ability. And some candidates I could see, we definitely you're probably thinking of the one candidate that is the most charismatic, but may be not the best leader. And then another person who doesn't seem that charismatic, but has a good experience and has a good track record of leadership. So these are sort of, what you have to choose from when you vote. But charisma comes from the Greek word meaning gift. And when talking about charismatic leaders, one will refer to someone with certain gifts or abilities. So charismatic leader will often gain followers through personality rather than through authority or ability. So there are 4 key characteristics that are associated with a characteristic leader. Leader must have vision expressed as an idealized goal. The leader must be willing to take on high personal risk and engage in self-sacrifice to achieve the vision. In doing so, the leader needs to remain sensitive to the feelings and the needs of the followers. You need to feel like the leader cares about you. And throughout the process, the leader may be engaging in behaviors that are perceived counter to norms, thereby extraordinary. Doing things that, oh my God, you can't say that, you can't do that, but he did it, or she did it. It's really amazing. And this is what makes us want to follow them. They're inspirational to us. So very interesting, if you look at, there are a lot of charismatic leaders from the 60s, like Martin Luther Jr., and President Kennedy. These are some examples. Okay, so are these charismatic leaders born or made? So the charismatic traits are often traits that a leader is born with. It's a personality they have. And you'll see these traits from them from a young age. So it continues this debate whether leaders are born or developed. Certainly, charismatic leaders are more born than developed. In reality, it could be a mix of genetics, training, and experience. So charisma can be created in a way that develop an aura of charisma by being optimistic, passionate, enthusiastic, and to communicate with behaviors and words effectively. So leaders can also create charisma by drawing in others through inspiration, as well as tapping into the emotions of individuals to bring out their potential. So I kind of think a charismatic leader really hits the nail on the head as far as what people are feeling and expresses the frustration that people have in a way that other people aren't get. So sometimes a charismatic leader is just really the first to realize a particular situation and, express it and take advantage of it to a population. Okay, so how charismatic leaders influence their followers. So we're talking about an appealing vision, a set of values, model behaviors for those values, and expressing dramatic behavior. So a lot of times charismatic leaders can be associated with religious movements or religious leaders. And they can be, so charismatic leaders could be good leaders. I don't want to say good, maybe more like good and evil. There could be some evil charismatic leaders that use their charisma for negative purposes, and there's someone who uses it for positive purposes. So the evidence shows a 4-step process that can help charismatic leaders to utilize their characteristics to influence others. So the first is The leader articulates a long-term strategy for achieving a goal, and this strategy would fit the vision and uniqueness of the organization. Next, the leader needs to formalize that vision by creating a vision statement. And charismatic leaders will often use this statement to reinforce the goals and purpose of the organization. This vision is communicated in a way that expresses the leader's excitement and commitment to the goal. Next, the leader will use his words and actions to communicate a set of values for followers to imitate. And then the charismatic leader will try to find behaviors that demonstrate their commitment to the vision. And they will choose behaviors that will help followers catch the emotion that the leader is conveying and help them achieve a buy-in from their followers. So if you think about it, charismatic leaders engage in emotional inducing and often unconventional behaviors to demonstrate the courage and conviction about their vision and help followers catch the vision. So they become almost infectious. Their ideas and their emotions become infectious, and people just get swept up in this charisma. And oftentimes it takes a while for them to realize if this person's vision or what they're doing is actually good or bad. So charismatic leaders can be very effective leaders, but they can also be a type of leader that can easily abuse their leadership abilities and powers. So these leaders have been shown to be effective, but often depends on the context. So leadership style works best in an environment where it is uncertain, stressful, and when there's some ideology involved, like a religion or politics. And it is more closely associated with upper-level executives, and people are more receptive to charismatic actions when there's a crisis. So it's really almost like looking for a superhero. There's a real crisis, you don't know what to do, you feel upset, you feel disenfranchised, and this person comes out and says, you don't have to feel like that anymore. I understand how you feel, and I'm going to change it. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stand up to people, and I'm going to make this change. And it really inspires us. And especially if there's a crisis, we look towards someone to give us some sort of stress relief or some sort of support, or make us feel like things are going to be okay. And those are the situations that charismatic leaders really are born from. So if people are content, the charismatic leader isn't going to be so effective. But when people are uncontent and upset and disenfranchised and feeling stressed, that's when these charismatic leaders can come in. But like I was saying, there is a dark side to this leadership. If they misuse their set of skills, in the past, they have seen situations where leaders have abused the company's resources and used them for their own benefit. Some leaders with strong charisma have made the companies in their own image and left no plans for succession when they leave. In many cases, charismatic leaders let their own goals override the organization and thus create a negative situation for the organization. So sometimes if they take it too far and remake the company in their own image and allow the self-interest and personal goals to override the organizational goals, they can really be harmful. So sometimes charismatic leaders are good in the beginning and really get things going, but sometimes they take it too far, and companies, are just totally reliant on that charismatic leader for people to believe in the company and for the company to really keep moving forward. And this is something people worried about Apple when Steve Jobs passed away. How is the leadership going to pick up from this really charismatic business leader? Will they be able to maintain the company without him? Because he left the company once before it was fired, and the company did terrible. So that was on a lot of people's minds. Now let's move on to transformational leadership. This is another type of leadership. And in transformational leadership, these leaders motivate their followers towards the goal by clarifying their roles in the process and what they need to do to reach that goal set. So transformational leadership will help followers to look at the bigger picture and commit to the good of the organization, even if it means setting their own personal goals aside. These two approaches are not necessarily contradictory in nature. In fact, they can complement each other. So transformational leaders often build upon transformational leadership. Good leadership will incorporate both transformational and transactional components. So these transformational leaders have to rely on transactional leadership. So transactional leaders motivate their followers in the direction of establishing goals by clarifying the role and the task required. So this transactional leaders really tell you exactly what's the goal is, what needs to be done, and what tasks have to be done. Those are transactional leaders. Transformational leaders inspire followers by transcending their own self-interest for the good of companies, of the organization. So think of transactional as really knowing the job and the best way of doing the job and being able to communicate that to people. And transformational is really transcending, your own personal interests, where people know that everything you do is for the good of the company, and you're making personal sacrifices to make sure that that occurs. And that's something you could, is really inspirational to a lot of people. So here's the full range of leadership. So this shows you the full range of leadership. From the first 4 behaviors represents transactional approaches, and begins with the laissez-faire approach, which is like do whatever you want, which is the most passive. And as leadership progresses on the scale, they move towards more active behaviors, managing by exception, contingent rewards. Actually, I said the first 4 behaviors are transactional, but it's really these first 3 behaviors. I apologize. Now, as leaders progress on the scale, they move towards these more transformational roles, like these top 4 are more transformational. And behavior represents these actions, these models that show the leaders that utilize more of these transformational behaviors we had talked about that become more effective. So, this would be the idolized influence, or idolized influencers, I like to say, is someone that you blindly follow and believe and do what they say. Then you have the inspirational people who really, you don't follow everything they say, but they really do inspire you. Intellectual simulation, people who can, help to transform you through ideas and through intellect, and individual consideration is leaders that believe in you and support you and give you self-efficacy to make you believe you can do the job. So an effective leader really has hopefully all these traits, but it has these traits at the right time. Because there are some times when a manager or a leader needs to be hands-off and just basically give you the trust and the belief that you're going to complete the assignment and doesn't have to sit on top of you every minute. So sometimes laissez-faire management, even though it's the most passive, can be very effective. And I think we've all appreciated when we've had a boss who understood our capabilities and understood our efficiency and our commitment to the job, and really gave us the latitude to get our work done without sitting on top of us. So if we evaluate this transformational leadership, it works in a variety of contexts, but tends to be more effective with smaller companies. So it does work better when the leader is more closely connected to the followers. He can understand their situation and work with them directly. So link between transformational leadership and positive job outcomes is more solid. So this is a great type of leadership for a smaller company where the leader knows everybody and can have a chance to meet and talk and work with everybody. Okay. So it's sort of that can-do spirit, like a cheerleader, and create and inspire the creativity, and really just somebody that the people of the company can look up to and say, I work for him and I'm proud to work for him or her. Okay, so global implications. This study links elements of transformational leaderships with effective leaderships regardless of country. According to the study, various elements of transformational leadership, including vision, foresight, providing encouragement, trustworthiness, dynamicism, positiveness, and proactive elements are universal. However, the vision is formed and communicated can differ across different cultures. So leadership's not the same everywhere as far as how they get same elements, but how they get the ideas across can be different. Research shows that transformational leadership results in more desirable outcomes. However, contingent reward leadership sometimes works as well as transformational leadership, depending on the person and the situation. So there are a lot of commonalities between transformational and charismatic leadership in general, but charismatic leaders focus on how leaders communicate, while transformational leaderships focus on what is communicated. So charismatic leaders are good at getting an idea across or getting a way of thinking across, and communicating that, where transformational leadership is more about the technical side of what they're communicating and how effective they are at transforming what they're communicating into actual actions and results. Now, being a good transformational leader is someone who takes a bad situation, makes it better. And because of that, oftentimes transformational leaders have employee base which has a lower turnover, higher productivity, lower employee stress or burnout, and higher employee satisfaction. So if you have a leader that's transformational and is very good at being a leader, and you feel rewarded and secure and supported, you definitely like your job better, and it shows, and in your performance and your ability, and the longer you stay and your day-to-day stress. That's why leadership is so important. Now, authentic leaders is a growing area of research where we look at several components that need to be addressed when discussing authenticity in leadership. So, an authentic leader, first they must look at how they engage. Are they more reflective and understanding of who they are and what they believe, and bring these aspects together in their actions? So authentic leaders tend to create trust with their followers and encourage a culture of open communication. And these factors can help create an authentic leader that people will follow. So this is someone that you can trust to do the right thing. So an authentic leader, they have values and ethics, and they're very transparent and open, and they're very candid. You just trust them completely that they're not going to screw you over. I almost said a bad word. Sorry. They are going to. You can trust their communication, that they encourage the communication in a way that you feel free to express your ideas without being penalized or criticized, and that people just have general faith and belief and their ability to manage, and their trust and support in the situation. That really makes you, if you see the manager trusts you, supports you, does what's best for you, you're going to want to do the same back for the manager. And that builds a really strong relationship that's going to really make a strong organization. Very powerful. It's hard to, become an authentic leader, but through leading by example and people witnessing that you have certain core values that are impressive, that you don't give into your weakness, you don't gossip, you don't, as a leader, you don't play favorites, that you don't show negative sides of your personality that would really make a person feel ostracized, attacked, pressured, or misunderstood. Now, ethics and leadership, the strong intersection of ethics and leadership. And over the past several years, we have been involved in what may be called an ethical crisis in the business community, especially in finance and accounting and all these areas. And so we look at leadership. We need to look more than the results of the leader. We want to look at the steps the leader is taking to achieve the results. Are they ethical? We don't want to just look at the profits they generate. We want to look at the amount of success they've had, and their examples of being just and ethical, and their moral tone, and doing things that are more difficult because they're better for the environment. They're the right way of doing things, not taking shortcuts. Achieve their goals through like a framework of commonly agreed to ethics. And a socialized charismatic leadership conveys other-centered values by leaders who model ethical conduct. So it's really just, especially this day and age, it's leaders who take a stand to do what's right, even if it means that the bottom line is going to be hurt a little bit as far as profits. They're still doing what's best for society and the company and the employees, most importantly, which really is a leadership you can believe in. Now, servant leaders, they go beyond their own personal self-interest and focus on the opportunities to help their subordinates, their followers, grow and develop. So the persuasion is getting people to be the best possible people that you can get them to be. So there's a perceived commitment that a supervisor has, and they work to develop self-efficacy which we talked about. I think I talked about that earlier in some of the chapters. And it's really giving your employees the belief they can achieve something. So this type of leadership is really trying to motivate and provide the confidence and the perception that the employees can do it. So they increase the team effectiveness and performance because they're giving so much of themselves to help the other people achieve and advance. So it's more effective in certain cultures. So they don't use power to achieve their goal. So they don't use their ability to hire and fire or give raises or promotions to really achieve their goals. They don't work through fear or punishment. Instead, they focus on persuading followers. And the effect of the servant leaders include higher levels of communication to their employees to get them to understand what they're doing is for their own best, for the employees' best interests, and feeling that your manager or your leader is sort of also your mentor, and this increases team potency and leads to higher levels of group performance and greater focus on growth and achievement, which leads to higher levels of performance, creative, and financial performance for a company. So they're very unique types of leaders. Someone that you feel has your back and is trying to, have you do the best for you. Okay, so if we look at trust, so in the trust environment, trust is a very, very critical component. You can't be a good leader without the trust of your followers. So when we talk about this, the trust is defined as a state that exists when you agree to make yourself vulnerable to others because you have a positive expectation for how things are going to turn out. Over the years, this has been found to be a foundation of a very powerful foundation for a characteristic of a good leader. When trust is present, followers are willing to do as the leader asks, engage in behaviors that are for the benefit of the organization. In short, followers will do a lot more for the leader that they trust than ones that they do not trust. And I think that's just common sense. Trust is developed over time. It is not instantaneous. The interaction between the leaders and the followers are part of this development of trust, and it goes both ways. So research has shown that the three main characteristics of a leader that instill trust and integrity, ability, and kindness, that these three characteristics are important in developing trust between leaders and followers. If leaders are perceive these characteristics, if the followers perceive these characteristics as strong in their leaders, it encourages positive behavior such as risk-taking, information sharing, group interactions, and productivity enhancement. So this trust, if we develop a core trust between me and you, then you feel confident to take these risks, to share information, or not try to fear that if you share something, it's going to be used against you. And then groups become more effective and productivity enhances. So trust is such a critical element in doing well. Okay. So mentors are an interesting part of being a leader. So a very senior person, it's almost a responsibility to find someone to support and become a protege. And, so you take a less experienced employee under your wing and you help mentor them in, what they should be doing for their career, for the company. And it's sort of informal. And there could be formal mentoring where companies set up programs and match people, but usually the informal mentoring is much more effective. And a lot of it's psychological. And a lot of it's based on sort of like a friendship. Like you meet somebody in the company who are, you look up to, and this person happens to be, that mentors need to be a good teacher. And they need to present ideas clearly and listen to the employees and emphasize with them their problems, and really give them a framework for a successful track, a framework for success. So it's a relationship that serves a career function, a psychological function. Is like, hey, this person sees something in me and believes in me. I don't want to disappoint them. I want to, live up to their expectations and use their examples. And you see what they've achieved, and you really, can be a great boost if you can get one or two or three mentors that work with you in subtle ways or more aggressive ways. It could be as subtle as just going to lunch once a month, or someone you work with more closely. But people who are open to that mentor-mentee relationship get a lot out of it. And generally leaders who are willing to mentor people, it's a very rewarding and satisfying thing for a leader to do when they get to that level. Okay, so challenges to lead the leadership construct. There are many challenges to understanding leadership. The attribution theory states that it's hard to attribute outcomes to leadership, and that often leadership is more about performance than outcomes. So in addition, you can have an extremely effective leader, but the organizational variables can neutralize the leader's ability to lead and create change, thus rendering the leader as irrelevant. So the leader has to have the right opportunity and environment to lead and be successful. So sometimes good leaders aren't successful because the organization won't allow it. Don't give them the resources, don't have the opportunities. So these are some challenges that good leaders don't always have good outcomes. There's a lot of factors involved in that. Okay, so substitutes for and neutralizers of leadership. So here we have defining characteristics for the individual: experience, professionalism, indifference towards reward. So, and then you have the job, defining characteristics about structured, feedback, satisfying, the organizational level of goals, rigid rules, cohesive work environment. So the relationship-oriented leader, no effect or substitutes or neutralizers, no effect on, so each one is no effect. There are substitutes and there are neutralizers for each of these particular situations. And it depends whether you're relationship-oriented or task-oriented, so they have a different outcome. And these could be, you could find substitutes for these characteristics. In some cases, they do have an effect. In some cases, they don't. So, but the neutralizers make it impossible for leaders' behavior to make any difference to follower outcomes based on certain characteristics. So we all agree that there are certain aspects of business and organizations that can neutralize the effectiveness of a leader. And this graph is just trying to list them out. Okay. Finding and creating effective leaders. So if you wanted to have a company with effective leaders, how can managers get the most from their leadership training budgets? So if you wanted to develop more leaders, one, leadership training is likely to be more successful with self-monitors, meaning that it's being observed and recorded. Organizations can teach implementation skills, definitely. We can teach skills such as trust building and mentoring. Trust building, the old routine where, okay, cross your arms and close your eyes and fall backwards and the group will catch you. That's an example of trust building. Behavioral training through modeling exercises can increase individuals' ability to exhibit charismatic leadership qualities. Leaders should engage in regularly reviewing their leadership after organizational events, and leaders can be trained in transformational leadership skills that have bottom line results, especially profits. So can businesses, they can and they should work to find better leaders. And for the leaders they have, they should work to develop them to be more successful leaders. I think every business, this is something, the holy grail of businesses are always trying to do this with varying degrees of success. Now, the implications for managers for maximizing leadership effectiveness, that ensures your preferences on initiating structure and consideration. So leadership is a complex function for an organization, and but it's essential for the success of the organization. So individual leaders and organizers need leaders. Organizations need leaders, and there are many factors to find what's successful. So each organization must assess what they need in their leader and how to be effective. So, when hiring candidates, having a better hiring process when hiring leaders to helpfully identify these traits and how the leader will match the long-term vision of the company. Looking for, trying to be able to judge through interviewing processes and research if people are ethical and trustworthy, and developing trust, how, trying to foster an environment where leaders can develop trust with followers, and investing in leadership training. So for management, hiring good leaders, keeping good leaders, and developing good leaders is all Very important. But keep in mind, leaders can influence a group towards achieving goals. And the best leaders are ethical and authentic in addition to being charismatic. So you want the best leader possible has all these traits. So if someone can be ethical, authentic, trustworthy, charismatic, transformational, can develop and convey a vision and motivate people to work better for them, that's a really rare entity. So if a company has someone like that, they need to do everything to keep that person, because they can really make the difference for the company succeeding or not succeeding. So in summary of this rather long lecture, this is longer than most of my lectures, we talked about the difference between leadership and management. They're two different things, but they're often associated together. And like I said, leaders can be managers, but not all managers are leaders. Now, we summarized the conclusions of trait theories of leadership. We identified the central tenets and main limitations of behavioral theories. We addressed contingency theories of leadership and level of support. We compared charismatic leaders and transformational leadership. We discussed the roles of ethics and authentic leadership. We demonstrated the role of mentoring plays in the understanding of leadership, and we addressed challenges to the effectiveness of leadership and discussed how organizations can find or create effective leaders. Okay, so that is the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed that lecture, and I'll see you again soon.